All right, so welcome to your deep dive. Today we're going deep into Susan Sontag's take on Jean-Paul Sartre's Saint-Genet.
Oh, Saint Genet. It's a tough one, isn't it? Even Sontag called it a cancer of a book.
Yeah, it's known for being dense,
Hmm.
but Sontag, she also saw the brilliance in it. All those ideas, like hidden gems, we're using her essay as a map,
Hmm.
basically, to help us navigate this philosophical jungle.
That's a good analogy. It really is like a jungle sometimes, Sartre's writing. So dense. But Sontag, she helps us cut through it, and she helps us appreciate what makes Saint Genet so unique.
Right, and it's not just the writing itself. It's Sartre's whole approach to criticism. It's like he just dives in head first. No rules, no boundaries.
It's true. He was completely immersed in Genet's world, and he wanted to show us everything, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah, but it's also clear that Sartre had his own agenda, right? It
Yep.
wasn't just trying to uh, present Genet. He was using Genet to showcase his own philosophy.
Absolutely. He had this dual aim to be faithful to Genet's life, but also to use it as a springboard for his own ideas.
Yeah, that's evident right from the start. Actually, I mean, the book itself is massive. It started as a short essay, but then it ballooned into this huge volume.
That's art for you. He couldn't resist showing off his intellectual muscles. Sontag even suggested that maybe Sartre got a little carried away.
It does make you wonder, though, how did Sartre even end up writing about Jean Genet in the first place? I mean, Genet was a known criminal. How does that connect to existentialism?
Well, it all starts with action. One of the core ideas of existentialism is that every action we take is intentional. It's a way of changing the world around us.
So even small choices, like what we have for breakfast or what we wear, they all have this deeper meaning.
In a way, yes, because those choices, they reflect our freedom, they reflect our desire to shape our lives.
Okay, I see. So how does that relate to Genet? I mean, he chose a life that was pretty far outside the norm.
Exactly. Genet embraced things that society rejects, things like crime and degradation. He saw those things as a path to a different kind of glory.
Glory, that's an interesting way to put it. I mean, it's hard to reconcile the idea of a criminal with glory, let alone with sanctity, which is a word that Sartre actually uses.
Yeah, that's where things get really fascinating. Sartre suggests that Genet achieved a kind of sanctity by confronting his own objection.
Abjection, that's a strong word. What does it even mean in this context?
It means embracing what's considered low or base or even repulsive. And Sartre argues that Genet, by focusing on these aspects of himself, he actually achieved a kind of spiritual liberation.
So by confronting what society deems bad or wrong, Genet was actually freeing himself.
In a sense, yes, he was rejecting society's moral codes and creating his. He was defining himself on his own terms.
It makes you think about how we all define ourselves, right? Like how much of our identity is shaped by what other people think.
That's a huge question, and it's something that Sartre grapples with throughout Saint Genet. He compares Genet to another rebellious figure, Baudelaire, and he explores why Genet was able to achieve a level of freedom that Baudelaire, according to Sartre, never quite reached. It's worth noting, though, that even though Sontag was critical of the book's density, she really admired Sartre's insights.
And she recognized the brilliance, even if it was buried under all those words. Like, okay, it's a tough read, she's saying, but there's gold in these hills.
Exactly. And one of the things she highlights is Sartre's analysis of moral language, of how we make choices. She quotes him, actually. He says, "Evil is the systematic substitution of the abstract for the concrete." Heavy stuff, right?
Whoa, that that is heavy. How do you interpret that? Substituting the abstract for the concrete.
Well, think of it this way. Imagine you see someone experiencing homelessness, and instead of seeing them as a person with their own unique story, you just see them as a problem. You see homelessness.
Ah, so you're not really seeing the person,
Yeah.
you're just seeing the label.
Exactly. You're substituting the abstract concept for the concrete reality. And Sartre argues that this kind of detachment, this reduction of a person to a category, that's the root of evil.
Wow. That's that's pretty profound and
Yeah.
kind of scary when you think about how easy it is to do that, to think in abstractions.
It is. And it makes you think about how we engage with the world, right? to be more mindful of the individual, of the concrete reality behind those labels.
So how does that connect back to Genet? How does he fit into this idea of evil as substituting the abstract for the concrete?
Well, Genet's whole life was about confronting and subverting social norms. He refused to let society dictate his values,
Yeah.
his morality. In a way, he was constantly pushing back against these abstract moral codes that tried to define him.
So by choosing his own path, even if it was considered criminal, he was rejecting that abstract morality.
Exactly. He was living a life grounded in his own experiences and his own choices. He wasn't conforming to some predetermined idea of good and evil.
It's interesting because that makes me think about Sartre's work on Baudelaire. He was another figure who rebelled against society, right? But Sartre seemed to see a difference between them.
He did. He saw a fundamental difference in their motivations and ultimately a difference in the level of freedom they achieved.
Okay, so what was Sartre's take on Baudelaire? How did he view his rebellion?
Well, Sartre argued that Baudelaire's rebellion was actually rooted in what he called bad faith. Basically, he was still trapped by the system he was rejecting.
So he was still defined by it, even though he was rebelling against it.
Exactly. He needed the disapproval of the bourgeoisie to solidify his identity as a rebel. He never truly stepped outside that framework.
And Genet, according to Sartre, was different because
Genet, in Sartre's view, achieved a much more radical form of freedom. He didn't just rebel, he created his own morality. He took what society called evil and transformed it into a source of liberation. He didn't need society's approval or condemnation. He transcended the system entirely.
So for Genet, transgression wasn't just a reaction, it was a path to genuine freedom.
Yes, and this is where Sartre's idea of the lucid free act comes in. True freedom, he argues, is only possible when we act with complete self-awareness, when we take full responsibility for our choices. And Genet, according to Sartre, embodied this idea.
That's a pretty high bar for freedom. Did Sartre give any clues about how we might achieve that kind of self-awareness?
He didn't lay out a specific path, but he used Genet as a kind of case study. Genet didn't just react to the world, he actively shaped it through his choices.
So it's about taking control, about making conscious choices, even if those choices go against the grain.
Right, but it goes beyond individual actions. Sartre connected Genet's journey to a broader philosophical framework. He drew heavily on the work of Hegel, actually.
Hegel.
Yeah.
Okay, how does he fit into all of this?
Well, Sartre was really influenced by Hegel's philosophy, particularly this idea of the dialectic. It's a way of understanding things through their opposites. And Sartre saw Genet's life as mirroring the dialectical process in Hegel's phenomenology of mind.
Hold on, can you unpack that a little? How does Genet's life mirror Hegel?
Well, in phenomenology of mind, Hegel describes this journey of consciousness. It's a process of confronting limitations and evolving through those confrontations. Sartre believed that Genet's life, his journey from outcast to acclaimed writer, it mirrored that process. It reflected this idea of the self coming to understand itself through its relationship with the other.
So Genet's life was like a real-world example of Hegel's abstract philosophy.
In a way, yes. And through that lens, Sartre explored these big questions of freedom, identity, morality. But before we get too lost in the philosophical weeds, I want to circle back to Sontag. She also highlighted Sartre's praise for Genet's book, Funeral Rites.
What was it about funeral rites that stood out to Sartre?
Funeral Rites is one of Genet's most powerful works. It's complex, it's multi-layered, it deals with love, death, betrayal. But what really struck Sartre was the way Genet uses language. He doesn't just describe the world, he actively transforms it through his writing.
Do you have an example of that? How he transforms the world through language?
Well, in Funeral Rites, Genet describes transforming the entire world into the corpse of his dead lover. It's a very powerful image, and it reflects both his grief and this ability to reshape reality through his imagination.
Whoa. Intense. And I'm guessing this connects to that idea of cosmophagy we talked about before.
You got it. Cosmophagy, which is
Yeah.
a term Sartre coined. It refers to the idea of consciousness devouring the world. It might sound strange, but it's central to Sartre's philosophy. Consciousness, he argues, plays an active role in shaping, even consuming the world around us.
So by By transforming the world into his lover's corpse, Genet was enacting that cosmophagy.
Yeah.
He was like consuming the world through his grief, through his imagination.
Exactly. And that act of cosmophagy is closely related to another provocative concept that Sontag brings up, masturbating the universe. It might sound shocking, but it's actually a brilliant metaphor for the way Genet and really any artist exerts their will on the world through creation.
Wait, did she actually say masturbating the universe?
She did, and she ties it directly to Sartre's analysis of funeral rites. She says Genet's arrogant madness goes further. He jerks off the universe. But it's not just about shock value. There's a deeper meaning here.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the deeper meaning?
Think about it. Creation, any kind of creation, it's an act of imposing our will onto the world. We take raw materials, whether it's physical materials or ideas or our own experiences, and we shape them into something new. It's an act of power, of self-expression, and yes, even of a certain kind of pleasure. And Genet, in his extreme transgressive way, he embodies that creative impulse taken to its limit.
So when she says jerks off the universe, she's not being literal. She's talking about the audacity of creation, the way art allows us to kind of possess the world through our imagination.
Exactly. And that's where we see the connection back to cosmophagy. Both concepts point to this active role of consciousness in shaping and consuming the world around us. It's like we're not just passive observers, we're active participants in creating our reality.
That's a pretty empowering thought. But it also makes you think about the ethical implications. If we're all masturbating the universe in our own ways, does that come with responsibilities? Can that kind of freedom lead to chaos, or can it lead to something more meaningful?
Those are definitely questions worth pondering. And before we go too far down that road, there's one more important point that Sontag makes about Saint Genet. She suggests that the book represents a path that Sartre himself could have taken, a path focused on ethics rather than the political direction he eventually pursues.
So Saint Genet is like a glimpse into an alternate philosophical path for Sartre.
Precisely. And it raises a fascinating question. What would Sartre's legacy have been if he'd continued down that path? Would his work be different? Maybe less controversial, maybe more accessible?
It's a real what-if moment in intellectual history.
It is, and it makes you realize how much of a philosopher's work is shaped by their own choices, by the historical context they're living in.
Yeah, it makes you think, doesn't it? Like how different things could have been, you know?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how these ideas from Sartre and Genet, they still feel so relevant today. I mean, we're talking about stuff that was written decades ago, but it still has this power, you know? But I got to admit, all this talk about cosmophagy and masturbating the universe, it kind of leaves me wondering, like, where do we go from here? What are we supposed to, like, actually do with all these mind-blowing ideas?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? What do we do with all this? And I don't think there's a simple answer, but maybe the takeaway is this. By exploring these unconventional figures like Genet, we open ourselves up to new ways of thinking. You know, we start to question our assumptions about things like morality and freedom and even reality itself.
Right, like Genet, just by being himself, he kind of throws a wrench into our neat little systems, you
Yeah.
know, our categories, our labels. He forces us to confront the messiness of it all.
Exactly. He reminds us that real freedom, it doesn't come from fitting in or from following the rules. It comes from embracing our own unique paths, even if those paths lead us to some pretty unconventional places.
It's powerful stuff. And it really shows how sometimes the most profound insights can come from the most unexpected sources.
It's true, and Sontag emphasizes that too. She points out that Saint Genet itself, it represents this alternate path that Sartre could have taken, a path focused on ethics rather than politics.
So this book, it's almost like a window into a different version of Sartre. A Sartre who might have asked different questions, left a different legacy.
Exactly, and it makes you think about the choices we all make, you know, the paths we choose, and how those choices, they don't just shape our own lives, they shape the world around us.
Yeah, it's like this ripple effect. One person's choices can have these far-reaching consequences.
Absolutely, and I think it speaks to the importance of individual action, you know,
Yeah.
and the power of ideas to change the world.
So as we wrap up our deep dive here, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all this, from Sartre, from Genet, from Sontag? What's the big takeaway?
I hope they come away with a sense of the power of critical thinking. The importance of questioning assumptions.
Yeah.
By engaging with these challenging ideas, even the ones that make us a little uncomfortable. We open ourselves up to new possibilities. We expand our understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
That's a great point, and I got to say, this has been a really thought-provoking journey. We've covered a lot of ground, from existentialism and freedom to cosmophagy and masturbating the universe. It's a lot to digest.
It is, but it's the kind of intellectual challenge that keeps you coming back for more. And if anyone out there is feeling inspired to dive deeper, I highly recommend checking out the works of Sartre, Genet, or Sontag. There's always more to uncover, more layers, more connections.
Absolutely. And hey, maybe this deep dive will inspire you to create something of your own, to go out there and masturbate the universe with your own unique vision.
That would be fantastic.
So until next time, keep those minds turning, and happy diving.